As you might expect, different sectors or different actors and networks are coming up with different narratives of transformation. Those in the energy sector, technology-led, will be thinking about transformation in one way. State governments will have a different set of interests and may view transformation through another lens. The market, investors, development banks, and then last but not least, what are citizens' views on transformation? How do citizens organize to try to affect transformation? And of course, in South Africa, you have a particularly dramatic history in that respect. I think one thing that many agree on is that transformational change is different from what's sometimes called incremental or reforming change. In incremental change, what we try to do is we try to do more of the same, but we try to do it better. Are we doing things right? How can we improve performance based on existing rules? So if we think about the waste sector, how can we get better at reducing waste? In reform, what we do is we don't just do things better, but we ask, are we doing the right things? Maybe we need to be doing some different things. Maybe we need not just to be reducing waste, but actually moving to waste recycling. So to do that, we change policies and laws, we revise rules, and we reorganize structures. But in transformation, as some of you were saying in the in those small groups in the plenary, it's about more drastic, disruptive, and innovative outcomes. It's about trying to create even previously unimagined possibilities. Can the caterpillar imagine the butterfly? Or if not, how might the caterpillar get there? So visioning, experimenting, inventing, and innovating are all important. And culture change becomes a really important sphere. The narratives, the stories we tell ourselves about who we are and what matters become important. Then shifting power relations is actually really central to transformation. History is a useful guide. If we think about some of the fundamental beliefs, but also the practices that surround us, they come out of the Industrial Revolution, which started in the UK and spread rapidly throughout Europe and into North America. And in the very early stages of the Industrial Revolution, a whole set of different things changed at the same time. What's really interesting is we had changes in energy practices from wood to coal. We had a shift going on from religion to the Enlightenment, a shift from crafts to science, and shifts in finance, transport, institutions, and how people were recognized in society. So actually that process started for various historical reasons with shifts in a whole lot of different areas. And I think this theme of multiple shifts in multiple areas is an important one. This is some work by Mark Swilling at Stellenbosch. Some of you may know him. He's been writing about, he prefers the word transition to transformation. And part of his writing is taking this long-term historical view. And he argues that we've been through a number of transitions in the industrial epoch. So after the Industrial Revolution, we had then the age of steam, the age of steel, then the age of oil, and now moving into the information age. And he believes that actually we're going through a really deep shift currently into something that may turn out to be a sustainability era. So I think that's quite helpful for giving us a sense that there are deep changes afoot, and that it is helpful to try and understand those deep changes and to work with them if we can. Quite an early approach to thinking about transformation is this multi-level perspective. A number of you mentioned that scale is important, and this work by Frank Giels and others in the Netherlands, in Belgium, and then also in the UK, produced a very interesting early model. And here what they're arguing is that actually transformations happen because new innovations happen at a local level in what they call niches. So small networks of actors working on innovations. They could be technology innovations, they could be social innovations, guided by radical visions often, they come up with new approaches, new products, new technologies. But it can be hard for those new technologies and ways of doing things to break through into the mainstream regime, because a combination of culture and policies and skills and scientific views, what's being invested in and consumer preferences hold that regime as it is. There are lots of vested interests, and so they shut out niche innovations and niche experiments. However, from above, in the global landscape, you might have something like a financial crisis or a COVID crisis, and that really tests and wobbles the dominant regime. For example, the energy regime in South Africa built around coal. And it means that there are spaces or gaps that new renewable technologies can upscale into. So this was a very useful set of ideas that came out in the thousands, and they were applied in Belgium and the Netherlands. And people in government in both those countries said, well, can we manage these transitions? Can we nurture niches? And can we manage innovations and bring them into the mainstream regime? So can we incubate innovations? And there was some mixed successes with that. They experimented in sustainable water management and energy transitions, but these processes weren't that successful, and ultimately they were seen as too technocratic, too controlling, focused too much on nurturing niches, but not enough on understanding the politics of what happens when new technologies, in this case, confront the dominant regime. The climate investment funds is a really interesting experiment because it's, I've just mentioned those experiments in the Netherlands and Belgium, but the climate investment funds were set up as multilateral funds to support experimentation and innovation at a global scale. And it worked in multiple countries. You can see some of the examples in Africa. I forget how many it is, but 12, 15 countries, and similarly in Asia and Latin America. And part of the vision of the climate investment funds was that it was going to work at scale and over the long term. So planning for innovation, and particularly thinking about how financing, long-term financing at low rates, so concessionary financing, in order to build track records in unproven markets, boost investor confidence, and unlock additional sources of finance. I'm just going to let in Schlengui into the meeting. And the climate investment funds worked in 4 different domains. They worked on clean technology, so essentially renewables in middle-income countries, but also access to renewable technology in developing countries. They also worked on climate adaptation and resilience and on sustainable forestry. And the climate investment funds were set up in 2008. So 2009, 10, 11, the first investments were being planned and then programmed. And from the start, it was proposed that the climate investments funds should be transformational. But nobody could really agree and chose not to discuss too much what they actually meant by transformation. And it wasn't until almost 10 years after the funds were set up that it was felt it was timely to really get to grips with what was meant by transformational change, so that it could be better managed and better catalyzed. And so I was part of the team that worked with the funds at the World Bank to try and understand with them. So we were a set of evaluators brought in to try and build a transformational theory of change, or a theory of transformational change, and to help them understand the key components they've been working with, how effective they've been, and how those could be further catalyzed in the future. And so we came up with a framework, and this framework speaks, I think, to a number of the things that you've been talking about. And remember, this is a framework, this is a global framework. to take on the global challenges of the climate and energy crisis, or not, the climate crisis and the energy transition to renewables, but also to try to apply this to sustainable land use around forestry and building climate resilience. And this is the framework we came up with, and we said that essentially 5 different components needed to come together for effective transformation. And so the definition of transformation is built around those 5 components. So the definition is that transformation involves fundamental change in systems that are relevant to climate action with large-scale positive impacts. So that's like the goal. That shift and accelerate. So that's about speed, the trajectory of progress towards climate neutral, inclusive, resilient, and sustainable development pathways.